Bobby the Brain Heenan was the greatest wrestling manager who ever lived. A ringside Mozart who composed symphonies of sarcasm while wearing a tux. But behind the bravado and barbs was a guy who didn't just talk smack for the cameras. He really hated some of these bastards. We're not talking worked rivalries or kayfabe beef. We're talking legit backstage shoot heat, broken trust, bruised egos, and busted relationships. These are the 5 men Heenan would have gladly tossed into the path of a moving ring truck if given half the chance. Strap in. It's going to get ugly. So, without wasting any time, let's get right into it. You know a guy's career is circling the drain when Bobby Heenan refuses to save it. That was Terry Taylor's problem. And no, not just because he was shoved into the Red Rooster gimmick like a guy getting pantsed in front of a date. Heenan managed the gimmick, sure, but he didn't manage Taylor. Why? Because he hated him. Straight up. In Heenan's own words, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. He didn't just mean the gimmick, he meant the man. Taylor strutted into the WWF locker room with NWA confidence and Crockett arrogance, and Heenan smelled it on him like a bad cologne. He thought he was hot stuff, said Bruce Pritchard on Something to Wrestle 2017, but Bobby? He saw right through it. Taylor thought he was destined for main event gold. Heenan thought he was destined for Wrestling Challenge dark matches. He'd mock him off mic, calling him Feather Flare and the rooster that laid an egg. And when Vince stuck Heenan with the Red Rooster angle, the Brain knew he was managing a gimmick designed to fail. Heenan could turn jobbers into heat magnets, but Taylor wasn't a heat magnet. He was a goddamn charisma black hole. Behind the curtain, things got tense. Taylor didn't take advice. Heenan hated that. Taylor blamed Bobby for the gimmick tanking. Heenan laughed and told everyone Taylor couldn't get over if he was on fire at WrestleMania. When Taylor jumped ship to WCW, Bobby didn't shed a tear. In fact, he once said, "The rooster flew the coop? Good. Now I don't have to step in his crap anymore." That wasn't a joke. That was Heenan's real shoot-level farewell tweet before Twitter existed. If you asked Bobby Heenan what Bruiser Brody brought to the wrestling business, he might have said, a bad attitude, unpaid house show fines, and the worst hair this side of a scarecrow fire. Heenan hated Brody, not in a playful, work-the-marks way. We're talking deep-rooted, real-life animosity. The Brain saw Brody as a reckless, unprofessional wild card who killed more territory momentum than a broken ring truck. And Bobby didn't just dislike chaos. He resented uncontrolled chaos that made him look bad. The heat started in the AWA, where Heenan was managing polished, reliable talent like Nick Bockwinkel, and Brody rolled in like a walking middle finger to structure. He'd no show bookings, brawl for real, and go off script like he was allergic to psychology. Bobby called him a lunatic who thought the rules were written in pencil. He didn't trust him in the ring or out of it. Heenan told Wrestling Eye magazine in a rare shoot-style moment, "You couldn't count on Brody. You didn't book him. You braced for him." Their paths crossed in St. Louis and again in Texas, where Heenan saw Brody get into it with promoters, stiff opponents, and just about anyone who told him to work a finish. Heenan prided himself on keeping his matches tight, his angles clean, and his workers safe. Brody treated every show like a goddamn riot in a metal bar. The final straw? Brody sandbagged a Heenan guy in a tag match and blew the finish so bad it made Heenan look like he'd booked it on acid. Backstage, Heenan snapped, calling him an embarrassment to the business and a disgrace to the boots. And when Brody was blackballed from major American promotions for being a liability, Heenan didn't mince words. Good. Let him work in Japan. Maybe they don't care if you kill the match. Brody was a legend, sure, but to Bobby Heenan he was a disease, and the cure was never booking him again. There are assholes in wrestling, and then there's Dynamite Kid, a guy so toxic Bobby Heenan once described him as the reason we couldn't have nice things. Now look, Bobby didn't throw shade lightly, but Dynamite? He earned every ounce of venom. Heenan wasn't some wide-eyed babyface shocked by locker room politics, and he thrived in that jungle. But even he hated Dynamite's guts. Not because of his in-ring style, though stiff doesn't begin to cover it, but because of how Dynamite poisoned every room he walked into. Let's be clear, Heenan loved managing talent. He liked working with professionals. Dynamite was the opposite, a walking lawsuit with roid rage and a bad attitude. He terrorized rookies, bullied ring crew, pulled cruel ribs that weren't funny, and turned the backstage into a toxic war zone. Heenan told longtime friend Mike Tinney, Dynamite wasn't tough, he was miserable, and he made it his job to make you miserable too. Heenan despised the way Dynamite treated staff like punching bags, especially when the cameras weren't rolling. He hated his holier-than-thou attitude toward American wrestling psychology, constantly bitching about tag match pacing and storytelling, like every match needed a 45-minute Tokyo Dome epiphany. And you better believe Heenan hated how Dynamite treated his own family. He once said, "If your kids are scared of you and your tag partner hates your guts, maybe you're not a wrestling genius. Maybe you're just a piece of shit." By the time Dynamite's back gave out and he limped out of WWF, Bobby didn't exactly send flowers. In fact, when asked about Dynamite years later, Heenan simply shrugged and said, "We lost a talented wrestler and gained peace and quiet. Dynamite was dangerous. Bobby didn't do dangerous. He did calculated heat. Dynamite was the guy who kicked in the locker room door just to piss on the rug. And Heenan never forgot it." If Ole Anderson was any more bitter, he'd come with a lemon wedge. And Bobby Heenan? He didn't just dislike Ole. He treated him like a walking hemorrhoid in a booking committee blazer. This wasn't backstage tension. This was shoot-loathing. Ole and Bobby clashed like two grizzly bears with creative control. Bobby was a performer, charisma, timing, and entertainment. Ole was a block of wood that hated anything with color. The man wrestled like he was mad that fun existed. Heenan said flat out in interviews, "Ole Anderson was the only guy who could make Ric Flair boring. That's a talent. A dark, miserable talent." The heat between them went back to the AWA and Georgia Championship Wrestling. Ole thought Bobby's style was too comedic, didn't like his bumps, didn't like his heat, and didn't like the crowd loving Heenan more than half the babyfaces. So Ole did what Ole always did, bury the stuff that worked. He'd veto Heenan's segments, cut finishes short, and tank any momentum Bobby brought with him. Heenan retaliated the only way he knew how, microphone flamethrower. If Ole had a personality, he'd rent it out during the off-season. Ole's booking style was just as joyless as his promos. He pushed stiff, slow matches with zero pop, and he made locker rooms more miserable than a 3-hour Iron Man match between two sleep paralysis demons. But the real knife twist? Ole helped push Heenan out of WCW. While Bobby was trying to salvage commentary under Bischoff's circus tent, Ole was backstage making sure the Brain had fewer and fewer allies. That betrayal stuck. Bobby summed up Ole in his book like only he could. "I've seen funeral homes with more life. Ole Anderson was born old, booked badly, and aged into irrelevance. They say respect is earned. Ole earned Bobby's eternal disgust." If Bobby Heenan could have booked one more match in heaven, it would have been Warrior vs. a Wall, just so the Wall could no-sell him too. Let's get this straight. Bobby Heenan fucking hated the Ultimate Warrior. Not in a fun, what a character kind of way. I mean real life, hold my wig, call a lawyer level venom. Warrior wasn't just a bad wrestler to Bobby. Warrior was a plague. A jacked-up, rope-shaking, promo-babbling thunderstorm of delusion who stomped through the locker room like he was Jesus in tassels. Bobby tried to work with him once. That's all it took. During their 1989 run, Warrior legit dropped Bobby on his neck, injuring his vertebra and causing years of pain. Bobby told Warrior to ease up. Warrior screamed something about cosmic energy and shoved a lighting rig. It wasn't just dangerous. It was idiotic. Warrior didn't listen to vets. He didn't respect timing. He didn't care about storytelling. He just wanted to run to the ring like a meth tornado and blow through everyone in 90 seconds. Heenan later said in his book, he had the body of a god, the brain of a stapler, and the personality of a dead car battery. He hated how Warrior held up Vince for money, hated how he big-timed everyone backstage, and hated how the guy thought quoting Nietzsche in promos made him deep. Newsflash, you're not a philosopher if your finisher's called the gorilla press. Bobby on commentary used to roast him live. The man can't spell title, let alone win one fairly. Warrior was everything Bobby hated. Selfish, unsafe, humorless, and high on his own cosmic nonsense. And Bobby? He was the last guy who'd ever buy into that Warrior-verse bullshit. Bobby Heenan wasn't just the greatest manager in pro wrestling history. He was also the pettiest legend alive, and we love him for it. These five weren't kayfabe rivals. They were real, backstage nightmares. Ole, Warrior, Brody, Dynamite, and Taylor didn't just cross paths with the Brain. They lit the damn bridge on fire and pissed on it. And Bobby? He kept the matches dry, just in case he wanted to burn them again. Because when the Brain hated you, you earned it. Like this ride through wrestling's grudge file. Hit that like, crack that subscribe, and ring the damn bell harder than Warrior's dumbass head hit Heenan's neck. Bobby would have wanted it that way. Thanks for watching.